All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. And I don't know how much white lightning I'll be pouring on your brain and how much I'll be ingesting because, as you can tell, my throat still hurts. So, Sam, what are we talking about today?
We've got a lot of things on the docket that I kind of want to go into. I've got something to just throw at you here in the beginning, but then I wanted to look at some COVID stuff because I was playing with spreadsheets and was looking at some articles that were making claims and stuff and things. And well, the numbers don't lie, even though they kind of do, because we don't know what's a real case and what's a real death and all of these things. But if we go by their numbers, it still doesn't paint the picture that's trying to be painted. Then I guess it's going to be a potpourri episode because I've got, if you want to talk some more nutrition stuff, I've got some general ideas, but also some stuff specific to cholesterol. I've been getting a lot of nutrition questions lately, so I've got it really fresh on my mind. Uh, we talked about obesity in children, but I've got numbers for nursing homes and stuff. So it actually pays to hire a trainer or learn what you're doing. Anything you wanted to talk about in particular?
Were we gonna do rant about some football because of the football last night?
We can do that. I didn't think it was too bad for you.
Uh,
I mean, there was the officiating was kind of but it was blood to both teams.
it was, yeah. Oh, where do you want to start?
Okay, let me make multiple shares, but I'm going to share screen first. This is something I came across not that long ago. Is it up?
Uh,
Okay, so, and
do
this
I
is,
have whiteness?
well, let's read what on having whiteness is about. The abstract. Whiteness is a condition one first acquires and then has a malignant parasitic like condition to which white people have a particular susceptibility. Notice that it's not just white people. It's we just have a particular susceptibility. Uh, the condition is foundational, generating characteristic ways of being in one's body, in one's mind, and in one's world. Parasitic whiteness renders its host appetites voracious, insatiable, and perverse. These deformed appetites particularly target non-white peoples. Once established, these appetites are nearly impossible to eliminate. Effective treatment consists of a combination of psychic and social historical interventions, i.e., struggle sessions. Such interventions can reasonably aim only to reshape whiteness's infiltrated appetites to reduce their intensity, redistribute their aims, and occasionally turn those aims towards the work of reparation. When remembered and represented, the ravages wreaked by the chronic condition can function either as a warning, never again, or as a temptation. Great again. Campaign slogan. Memorialization alone, therefore, is no guarantee against regression. There is not yet a permanent cure. This is, I do like the abbreviation because I think it's fitting. This is the Journal of American Psychoanalytic. Let's get that to come up here. Psychoanalyst Association. But I do like psychoanal as the abbreviation for this. But this is not a fringe publication.
No.
And also, I would like to point people to where the funding comes from. This nice big banner at the top. We paid for this. There's more, but I want to get your thoughts on the original part. First of all, never again, to me, the first thing I think about when I hear never again is I think of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Great again, that's the easy one. That's the MAGA.
Okay, if it's it's not just white people, but white people have a particular susceptibility, why are you calling it whiteness? You
Because
are
because if that's why Asians are discriminated against as well, because they're white adjacent.
what you're trying to do is other an entire race of people. And this is literally Nazism. The first anti-Semitic laws were public health laws.
Mm-hmm.
When they spoke about and not just the Nazis, but the eugenicists in America in the early 20th century, when they spoke about others, when they spoke about the lesser peoples, they spoke in these terms that they were physically or mentally deficient, and that uh, it was an incurable part of their nature.
Okay, so for the education of our audience out there, if you've ever been, and I have been, and this is one of the things that got me studying this kind of thing, in those Facebook feed comment session battles where you're like, I think I'm talking the most sense I could possibly talk. And this person is still coming at me from some direction I don't even know what it is. And you hear the words from the person you're debating or one of their rah-rahs. Are you sure you're not biased? And this is a common phrase from our good friend Dr. Johnson. Remember Jack's
Mhm.
friend? He will always resort to this when he is on the losing end of a factual argument. Are you sure you're not biased? This is what they mean by biased, the internal whiteness that you are parasitically infected with. It is inherent in the system, to quote the late, or not the late, but some of them are late, great Monty Python. Uh, in fact, the one that did that bit, isn't he passed away?
Which one?
Violence inherent in the system. Violence inherent in the system.
Oh, yeah, that was Graham, who passed away a while ago, and then who was the other guy? I'm drawing a blank, but yeah.
But either way, the this is what they're talking about. So the reason I brought this up before COVID is because all the things that seem to not make sense, and you hear the science. Again, I'll go back to the top. This is the science.
Mhm.
This is what's being funded nowadays. When you hear a news article that says experts say,
Mhm.
and they're talking about racial issues, this is where they're getting their information from. We need go no further than citations. 4 publications cited, including this one, The Unbearable Whiteness of Being in Nursing, in a prominent nursing journal, which in turn was cited by 8 other journals, 8 other publications, which these were in turn cited by other publications. Brett Weinstein keyed the term idea laundering. It's like
Mhm.
money laundering, but for papers.
This is how the um, environmentalist movement created the consensus idea, because one of the tricks they would use is they would cite all of these scientists or journal articles and papers supporting man-made global warming. Well, but what you would have there is you would actually have a very small percentage of actual climate scientists, climate physicists, and those kind of people. But then you would have like a biology professor who would do a paper on the effect of northwestern ground owls due to rising temperatures. Okay, but that doesn't prove the underlying premise. But then you get 1,000 papers like that and just start going around in a circle, and now you have a scientific consensus and you have all of these papers supporting you. Well, no, because you never proved the underlying premise in the first place. You're just circle jerking.
Okay, so let me quickly write a paper for you. Introduction, blah, 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 white, blah, blah, patriarchy, blah, 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 BIPOC, blah, blah, blah. Meat of the paper, blah, blah, blah. We know from the literature that white males target people of color at a higher rate due to their insatiable appetites. Citation, Donald Moss. Blah, 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 blah. Paper titled Rape Culture and Whiteness. There you go. That's how this is done. And then fill in the blanks with other citations from other stupid articles like this. I'm not even going to call it a paper. This is an article. This is an ethnography that some idiot wrote because they could not hack it in a real STEM field. So they got a $150,000 PhD in ethnic studies, or actually, I think he's actually a psychologist.
That's terrifying.
No, he doesn't have a PhD behind his name, so I don't know exactly what it is. But here he is in his publications in PubMed. But they all seem to be from this psychoanal journal on having whiteness, how to talk to your patients in COVID, basically. Here's one. I read that one. This Hansberry person was a famous black female playwright. And apparently her stuff's actually really good, but he ties all her stuff to Freud and then of course racism on situating homophobia. So again, usually experts say such and such racial indications, da 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 da, and homophobia and all this word salad. There's your expert right there.
That is actually a bugaboo of mine, and it's funny that on situating homophobia, that indicates that he has just disqualified himself in his own field, because homophobia is one of the stupidest words ever to be invented and thrown around in public discourse. Just because someone does not like gay people or does not agree with the gay agenda does not make them afraid. That's not an irrational fear of gay people. It's just not liking them or their agenda. It does have a
root, and it's a similar to xenophobia. There is a root to it. It's being misused, but the root to it is the fear of the dirtiness, the fear of the disease, the fear of again, you brought up Hitler and the Jews. People didn't know what was going on in the ghettos because they were afraid to go there because they would get sick. They thought, because they were told they're carrying this pestilence, so the root of the word, where it came from, was actually a fear of the other, from a more of a disgust standpoint, because it's the dirtiness, it's the disease, it's and that's actually one of the biggest. That's why disgust is such a big trigger, because back in the day when we didn't have modern medicine and soap and water, being around something completely different could give you something infectious. Great example, the Europeans coming to the Americas. We spread smallpox like crazy. The original root of the word is a phobia. It's the fear of that unknown pestilence, but it's being thrown around as this unsubstantiated term.
Well, it's a way of instantly dismissing an argument without having to engage the argument, because at its root, a phobia is an irrational fear, or it's a fear taken to an irrational extreme.
Well, that's why the language is what it is right now, because everything is about dismissing the argument instead of arguing the point. You don't agree that systemic racism is the root of George Floyd being where he was, then you're racist. No. Let's take a step back. I actually think there are problems, and I would love to help the other potential George Floyds of the world. And I think you're wrong in your approach to it. That's different. than
Hmm.
being a racist and just wanting to turn a blind eye to the whole situation. So but it dismisses the argument because it's an easy dismissal because no one wants to be seen as the racist, especially, oh, there's a new term going around and I love it. I love it. Awfuls. Affluent white female liberals. Awfuls. I usually hate catchphrases, but that one I love. I love that one because it's the root of the problem. It really is.
Hmm.
It's the voting base that keeps this going. It's the admin base that lets this in schools. It's the people in Martha's Vineyard that were crying as the National Guard is taking these people off their lawn. But they would be crying if they stayed on the lawn too.
Yeah, but you're the ones who called out the National Guard for
Mhm.
a handful of illegals. Meanwhile, they're swarming over the southern states.
Again, I try to be consistent. I hate using people as props, but it was the ultimate troll because it exposed exactly most of what we talk about.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's the reason why I can't go to that side. Like I just can't do it. I can't go all the way right for reasons we've talked about, but I can't go to that side either. So I'll stay out here in limbo. Fine, whatever.
Trying not to get sidetracked because of this nonsense. But did you have more that you wanted to circle it back into COVID with?
Well, the main point of that is the the idea of what are the experts when they say the experts say and where the science
Hmm.
is coming from and basically the bastardization of literature. Science and the literature are two different things, especially now. And especially if you hear the word the scholars say this, scholarly articles. That's actually the term they've adopted. The postmodernists, the BS pseudoscientists that are out there have adopted the term scholar, which I hate because a scholar used to be something you
Hmm.
aspired to be if you were an intellectual. But it is the only thing intelligent about it is the use of language. The rest of it is complete and utter BS.
This ties me into something that was making me really ticked off the last week. Um, is that okay? The experts, the science, etc. The more commercials I watch, the more pissed off I get. Um, and oh dear, what's
Keep going,
this?
keep going. I'm just setting us up for the tie into COVID.
Okay, so I don't know what you're going to, but the school makes me go, maybe I accidentally am setting you up. Is since I was in Florida, I saw a new commercial because it was targeting old people. And in the commercial, they give the stat that 9 out of 10 COVID deaths were people over 50. Hold on a second. Then why did we have schools shut down for so long? Why are people still resisting them opening? Why are you pushing shots on kids? The gaslighting is getting more and more ridiculous, and it's right there in front of your face because they'll say in one commercial 9 out of 10 COVID deaths were people over 50, and then in the next commercial they'll say the shots are now available for everyone, so everyone get a shot and get your booster. But you
with
just said,
with no disclaimers, by the way.
and which was my next point, because then the third commercial will be a different drug, like ask your doctor about this antidepressant, and here's the laundry list of potential side effects and interactions.
Yeah,
Why
and
did
and
why,
and
why
the,
wasn't that on the previous two commercials?
there needs to be a hammer thrown here, and I hope there's some lawsuits being pushed because they're skirting the rules. And if they're allowed to do this, every drug company is going to start doing this
Yes.
because with the booster commercials, it's get your booster. Boosters are available, and these are all the things you could be doing if you had them, which all of us in Texas have been doing for 2 years now. But
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of the point of where I'm going now. But the they never say get our booster. They never say get the community shot. They say get your boosters after the first round, by the way. You can't get a booster till you have the first round. which makes no sense because it's original strain. The booster is basically the same shot as the first round
Yeah.
with an Omicron part of it. Why can't the booster be your first round if you've never had the shot?
Yeah, I mentioned that last time I brought up the stupid commercials that were annoying me of Pfizer now touting how uh, boosters now specially formulated for variants. Well, then what have we been taking? Because this is
Yep.
not the first variant. But the other thing that pissed me off about the commercials is just aesthetically and intellectually looking at them. We're still operating under the freaking emergency use authorization. We, the people,
Not
are
for
still
community.
not for that, but I'm
Yeah,
not entirely sure that's available here yet.
it's
Is
not.
it? Okay. So
It's the last I checked, it's not. So
we're still operating under that. We, the people, are still subsidizing this crap heavily. And these commercials aren't PSAs. They are structured like any other drug
mhm.
commercial by Pfizer.
But they're getting around with it by saying boosters are available,
Mm-hmm.
not naming their product, not naming the name of the product.
Well, but then
And
at the end of the
and
commercial, they'll
then it
say
says brought to you by
brought to you
Pfizer
by, yeah,
and
BioNTech.
Moderna
Mm-hmm.
and BioNTech. Yeah. But then the other one is the Paxlovid commercial, which they're not allowed to advertise Paxlovid because it's under EUA.
Mm-hmm.
It's not officially
Well,
approved.
so
And
I've
so
seen
they say
commercials
ask
advertising it.
about your oral treatment,
Exactly. They
but
don't
it's the
name
only
the
oral
drug.
treatment.
Yes.
So it's the only oral treatment. Ask about your oral treatment. They're basically advertising the drug, but they're not. So now
Mm-hmm.
you've got any company out there that gets an approval, they can, if they know they're the only one on the market, they can just advertise, ask about your oral treatment for lupus, or
Mm-hmm.
ask about your oral treatment for, herpes virus simplex or something like that, and just not name the product. And if it's the only product available, that's what the doctor is going to prescribe.
Yeah.
And so they're getting around these rules, and it needs to be reined in. It really does. In fact, I'm with every other country in the world that doesn't let pharmaceutical companies advertise on TV. That should be between the doctor and the patient.
Mm-hmm.
And the salesperson and the doctor, whatever, that's fine, because the doctor theoretically should be educated on it.
Mm-hmm.
Us watching football on a Saturday and go, oh shit, I do get lightheaded every once in a while. Maybe I'll ask my doctor about that. It's not the same. But yeah, okay. So you did kind of lead me into this. So a little bit. We got distracted by pharma, but it's realistically the underlying issue. That and the political power gained by keeping people from the voting booths. But that's probably a rumble talk, not for here. But remote learning school reopenings. This is not a right wing publication. This is a left wing publication. And if you go through and read the whole article, it is about how systemically racist everything is, because
Mm-hmm.
it was minorities and poor people that were hurt worse by this, which is actually true. But that's where going into the data actually plays off, because we have the first 4 states to open their schools. Now, Iowa, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, is a swing state, right?
It used to be. It's right now with their governor and legislature, they're probably redder than Texas is.
But we have basically, other than Iowa, southern red states. And accordingly, the reaction to it. Now, I will add a little caveat here that if Trump was in power and he wanted to keep schools closed, it probably would have been the other way around. But uh, I hate to say that, because part of the closing everything down was to do the mail-in voting too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a hard one to call. Which was more important, And but we'll stick with that for now. This is what we have. These are the facts. We can speculate all day long about the other stuff. So let's go to the actual numbers. Made a little spreadsheet here. Now this is a little over a week old on the numbers, just because I didn't know when we were going to get to record, and I was bored on a Saturday, but it's
We
still
do
pretty
very
damn
different
close.
things when we're bored.
Okay, so if you go and get the numbers, you'll come up with everything but the ones I put in between. So this is right now it's sorted by total cases, which, oh my gosh, it actually correlates almost perfectly with the population of the state. California is number one, Texas is number two, Florida is number three, New York is number four, and I believe Pennsylvania and Illinois would flip there. But it's basically the number of cases correlates with the number of states. Now, I've got the states that we just talked about highlighted in yellow. Okay, so as we go through these numbers, these are the states that opened up in August of 2020. So we had that first lockdown, 4 weeks to flatten the curve. Schools were out. They stayed out through that end of that semester, then through the summer. And in these 4 states, they reopened, at least most of them. Some teachers' unions in big cities kind of held out a little bit, but these are the places that opened up first. All right, let's go. Let's sort these. Oh, I might have to move our camera here. Sort these by cases per. Oh, sorry, hold on. I better highlight the whole thing. I do know how to use Excel, people. Hold on. All right, we're sorting these by cases per million. All right, so as far as cases go, Florida stayed in the top 10. Arkansas is number 15. Oh my gosh, 39 and 40. Texas and Iowa. So this is relative to population. And as of this year, so a year and a half of being open compared to some of these other states. States that opened last, Rhode Island, oh, that's near the top. Where's New York? Oh, New York. It's under Florida, but it's higher than, way higher than Texas and Iowa. Where's California in all this? There it is, number 34. So still higher than all of these other states. So again, we're talking reopening schools. Remember, because that was what's going to explode the case number, right? Well, you know, cases and deaths aren't the same thing. If we let the kids back in school, they're going to bring it home to grandma, right? So let's see what happens when we sort by deaths per million. Custom sort, deaths per million. Oh my goodness. I don't see a yellow on the top of the screen. Well, we're halfway through. Oh, there we go. Texas and Iowa, Florida, way down there. Florida's a lot of old people too. Oh my goodness. Arkansas, near the bottom.
You know what? Just for funsies, I went and I pulled up real quick obesity rates by state to see if there was any correlation there.
I think I did look at that. No, I looked at age by state, and age by state did not correlate at all.
Yeah, obesity really isn't either.
Yeah. But yeah, if we look at who killed grandma, well, you know, it might have been something, but it wasn't opening the freaking schools. And realistically, bars, the mom and pop shops, all these things that these 4 states opened earlier.
And they opened earlier, but I'm still not sure how much they recovered. I kept wanting to talk to people, but I don't like talking to people because I was curious if that was a normal crowd in Orlando for that time of year, or if there was a bunch of stuff that closed because of COVID and never recovered. Because like one of the places we went was a real touristy area that had an IMAX and a Dave and Buster's and a bunch of restaurants, and so it was kind of like an open air mall kind of deal. I would say at least half the locations in this area were closed. And then we went to another area that was even more touristy, and there was probably a quarter to a third of stuff that was build uh buildings that were vacant, and it just felt off to me, and it made me wonder uh if they didn't open up enough quick enough, or simply did being open not matter because people weren't traveling.
Well, yeah, and it wasn't quick enough for a lot of small businesses.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I can with almost 100% certainty, had I still had the actual structured gym, not just my
Mhm.
private business, open when this happened, I would have been toast.
Yeah,
I would have been
because
I would have been taking the government loans, which is how they're going to make all the money back they gave in unemployment and
yeah,
uh
people people don't understand that you can you can have $1 million business. That doesn't mean you're a millionaire, and that doesn't mean you have $1 million lying around. Most most businesses are small business, and small business does not have the cash on hand to go through a month of nothing.
well, people don't understand what counts as an asset in your business. My client list counts as an asset in my business. If they're not coming for 4 months, am I going to charge them for those 4 months to keep them on the roll because they're an asset for my business? No, they cease to be a monetary income, but they're still considered an asset.
Mm.
And that, I mean, you just don't understand that destroys a service industry.
And if you were still paying the rent you were paying,
Yeah.
then boy, would you be screwed.
Yeah. Richland Investments would not have said, well, you know what? You can have these 4 months off out
It'll
of
be
the,
fine. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
the love and grace of our heart. Now,
they,
they might have said you can pay it when we start up again, but it would have been back paid.
yeah. Well, because even though they're a bigger business than you, they also don't have the cash on hand to just eat 4 months worth of rent not being paid.
Well, and what people don't understand, if you rent, this is something that I didn't know till I was actually doing the thing. If you rent a commercial spot in a commercial building, they have their property taxes, they have their insurance and their maintenance fees and all of that. If they go over on those, they don't just eat it. They have a clause in the lease that says basically it gets divided up by square foot to everybody in the building. And so, yeah, maybe they would have let us not pay for 4 months, but that would have been in that in reconciliation at the end of the year,
Yeah.
divided up by everybody in the building. In fact, it's kind of a soap opera here, and I hate that this is the reason it came about. But there's a bar in that same strip center I was in, real well loved local bar, and they opened as soon as kind of the state of Texas was wanting to do it, and some local people didn't like it. And the way they went about it, which is exactly what the systemic racism crowd complains about, and I agree with them here, is using the police force to enforce stupid bureaucratic nonsense. They basically just posted up outside of a bar and pulled everybody over that came out of it.
Oh, for crying out loud.
And if you post up outside of a bar and pull everybody over that comes out of it, you're going to people are going to blow over the 0.02% blood alcohol level that you're allowed because they drank more than 2 beers. And so I think they arrested like 24 people in 2 days. And so the owner of the bar spoke up, and then the police chief came after him, and they arrested him at his place for
For what?
for resisting arrest. They arrested him for resisting arrest.
Well, now I have to get us off track, and I resisted earlier, but did you see that the Bexar County Sheriff
Yes.
is opening an investigation to Ron
I'm loving the
DeSantis?
pundits from around the country going Bexar County. I'm like Bear
Yeah,
County, Bear
that's
County,
why that's why I said it.
Bexar County.
Yep. So Bear County Sheriff is opening an investigation into Ron DeSantis, because I guess that's where they got the illegals from. I don't know why they don't have enough in Florida for their own, but whatever. Um, One of his statements was chilling because he said, I can't point you to a specific statute or law that was broken, but I know this was wrong. That's not how your job works, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
That is
You
pure
enforce the
fascism.
law. You don't create the law.
That is pure fascism. That is, I am the law, Judge Dredd style. That person should be recalled right away. That
Mm-hmm.
person should, the sheriffs are in elected office. That man should be recalled because he has just demonstrated that he is unfit for his office.
And with the trend, the new trend of the Hispanic vote, he might be, because San Antonio has been a relatively blue area because of the Hispanic vote for so long, that now that they're starting to trend more, because they're like, oh my God, we're actually more socially conservative than we've been told.
Mm-hmm.
And uh and on the flip side, you don't have my back, because yeah, us immigrants do those jobs that you complain about, but at the same time, you're just letting more and more of those people in. There's a saturation point.
Oh
And
yeah.
we're at least smart enough to know that. Come on, we may not have gone to Harvard, but we know that there's a certain amount of jobs, and we're filling them, and we're very happy with it, and our kids are going to go to college because of it, and they're not stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is what the Harvard elites don't understand. Just because they didn't go to an Ivy League school does not mean they're stupid. They just haven't read your stupid books that we just brought up papers from.
Jeez. All right, let's get off of this before I get more angry. Well, speaking of the science, talk to us about cholesterol, Sam.
Okay, so this is a fun topic, because cholesterol. So when we talk about the science in other ways, no, we got to stick on COVID for a second. But let me make this
Okay.
statement. When we talk about the science in other ways, realize that one of the deciding factors in doing this was the fact that I was looking at all of this crap coming out with COVID, and I was like, this is kind of like the stupid bullshit I've been dealing with it and within fitness and nutrition for 15
Mm-hmm.
years now. There's so much bad crap out there that's basically because of the funding and the people behind it and the lobbies and the we have high fructose corn syrup because we make too much corn, not because it's the best thing to have in the product. We had the carbohydrate base in the food pyramid because we produce a lot of fucking wheat,
Mm-hmm.
not because it's the best thing for you, which we'll get into in the cholesterol. But the other numbers I wanted to compare is, we were talking about comparing to states, but this is one thing I disagree with Dr. Drew on. He says it's kind of a fool's errand to compare countries. I don't think it is, because
Yeah.
we can parse out things, right? And when we look at the death rate of the United States, death rate per population at the time I did these calculations, so a week and a half ago, was 0.32%. So that's not per case, that's not per serious infection, that's per person in the country. 0.32%. That's 1.5 million deaths approximately at the time.
That attributable to COVID?
Yeah, that were listed as COVID related deaths. All right. The worldwide death rate at that time was 0.085. So we're 0.32, they're 0.085%. So 4 times approximately the death rate than the world
Yeah.
average. And this is what got me on this too, because I was listening to a doctor in Uganda. Their death rate, 0.01%. So we're 32 times the death rate of Uganda.
So those are more interesting comparisons than the worldwide total, because the worldwide total is going to be skewed because there was like a 4, 5, 6 month period where China claimed it had no COVID deaths.
Mm-hmm. Well,
That's the most.
and also, this is I think it's big because we can break it down into its parts. And yes, to just the reason why people say it's a fool's errand to compare to other countries is because there's so many differences. But we can look at those differences to say, why do
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have such a high death rate?
Well,
And
you
then
can
look at
look.
the narratives coming out and actually bust a
Yes.
bunch of narratives. Okay, so what's one of them? Is it accessibility to healthcare? Remember the article we brought up that said if we had universal healthcare, we would have
Yeah.
saved 300,000 lives. You know what it takes to get to a doctor in Uganda? You got to get out of you got to get your sick ass out of bed and walk to the nearest town and find and it's not even it's kind of like a setup in most places. There are cities. It's not a 100% third world country, but at the same time, it's not nearly as advanced as we are.
Mhm.
And so it okay. So is it access to medical care? No, we can't say that if we compare these two numbers. Is it? Oh, we got the narrative. Black people disproportionately affected by COVID in the United States. Well, I think there's a genetic similarity, if I'm not mistaken,
Well,
more so than we have.
as we all know, Uganda is famously a white haven.
It's Asian, I thought.
Oh, is that what it was? Yeah,
Inuit population,
Inuit. Yeah, okay.
which the
Uh,
Inuits have that high omega-3 diet, so that maybe
that's it exactly.
which we'll go into with the cholesterol discussion here. That's why they were on the top of my mind. But so, is it the color of skin? Is it the genetic makeup? No. So it's not the access to healthcare. It's not the color of skin. Well, I was told it's not the therapeutics that they use over there. So it can't be that.
It can't be.
It
But
can't be.
I'm
There's
really resisting the urge to go down that rabbit hole. I'll
no, no,
just
no, no,
say,
no. Let's leave it at that. Let's just leave
yeah,
it at that because
I,
I
I
think it says it all.
I will leave it at this. If you haven't already, go listen to the Dark Horse podcast with Dr. Malone.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, there's more.
Is it
Do I
the
get a
age of
set
the
of steak knives?
population? Is it the age of the population? They're younger there than we are here on average.
Well, I've brought
But
that up
yet you're telling
numerous
me to
times.
mask my kids.
Exactly. I've brought that up numerous times that we knew very early on from the Italian data that, oh my gosh, there was media fear porn going on because the Italian system was just completely overwhelmed. But there were voices at the time saying, whoa, whoa, hold on, guys. Italy is the oldest country in Europe and one of the oldest countries in the world.
I think it
And
was the oldest country in the
yeah,
world. Yeah.
and I don't remember, so I don't almost all the overwhelming majority of deaths were from people that were very elderly. That was known from the beginning,
But
and
wait,
we didn't act
there's
accordingly.
more.
Oh, great.
I mean, obesity levels are way lower in Uganda. But I'm told that that's not a factor here because I mean, I'm fat phobic. So, I mean, what's the narrative that we're going to go with? Why we have a 32 times death rate than a country that has very little health access, a very low obesity rate, a younger population, uh, very dark in complexion. And what's the other one we said? Oh, and they take therapeutics that don't work. So give me a sixth variable that I'm missing, and we'll call it that. Wait, I wonder if their doctors actually treated them instead of saying go home until you're really, really, really sick. That one I don't know.
That still pisses me off. I'm
Yeah,
glad Dr. McCullough keeps harping on that because I think it needs to keep we need to keep being reminded of that fact. that, and I hadn't heard anyone mention it until he brought it up. Was it with Dr. Drew or someone else where he said, uh, no, someone else. I'd heard it before I listened to him on Dr. Drew that ethically, their professional ethics require that you either treat or you refer.
Mm-hmm.
If you cannot treat someone, you are ethically obligated to refer them to someone who can treat them, or your license is in jeopardy, except for this thing.
And here's my final point with all this. I named 5 things that were different about these countries. Only one of those we could not change. That's the age of the population. Every single one of the other ones we could have addressed. 32 times death rate. Thanks, Dr. Fauci.
And that's just the official statistics of COVID related. That doesn't even go into all of the excess mortality, which we can go down that rabbit hole later.
What was the increase in alcohol consumption, or at least sales? 325%.
Should have planted more corn last year and made more moonshine. All right.
So that was the final point I want to go there. Sorry, my notes are kind of I scribble when I make notes, so they weren't all in order. But okay, so we want to talk cholesterol. Pivot.
It's a related pivot. And we have mentioned before, we've talked about and brought up references for how the heart disease and saturated fat link was created
Mm-hmm.
by someone who set out to prove that and cherry picked the data to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about cholesterol, because someone had been asking me about it before. And so I thought, since we've been talking nutrition lately in our fitness talks, we should go down that.
Well, so one of the main things when I talk to, and this is, I don't like nutritionists and dietitians for the most part. Part of it is because of the education system on the subject. It's not exactly their fault they're where they are, but at the same time, it's very not sophisticated in their approach. Right? They're just like that was Freddie.
What was that?
I have no idea. The way he's sitting, it actually sounded like it came out of his backside, but that sounded like a nose blow. But so I got a big dumb animal, and he's also got serious allergies. So he's always scratching and always sneezing and always huffing and puffing. So he's like the biggest snuffleupagus ever. But so hopefully I can catch the next one with a mute before that happens. But gosh, that derailed me. Oh, in talks with and this is my first note here, in talks with dietitians and nutritionists, that especially fat nutritionists that want to harp the Mediterranean diet because of a WAPO article, because they're also super liberal and WAPO says everything true. But
Democracy dies in darkness, don't you know?
yeah, and the Mediterranean diet being pimped again, one that's heavy in grains, which are being subsidized by the government. But it's there's no connection there at all.
None at all.
Okay, so first of all, I don't hate the Mediterranean diet, but the secret is the olive oil. It's not the other stuff. It's the fish and olive oil, the high omega-3s. But the one thing they always bring up is cholesterol. Cholesterol, 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 cholesterol. And their proof of that, in one of their proofs of that, is heart disease is always the number one killer. Well, I've got a statement for everybody who brings up heart disease as the number one killer and wanting to tackle diet and nutrition for the sake of heart disease. If heart disease is ever not the number one killer, we need to all be fucking worried. Because heart disease is also heavily correlated with age.
least it
All the
used to
other
be.
things
I'm,
that
I'm sorry,
kill
I
you
didn't say
can
that.
kill you young.
Yeah.
Now, heart disease can kill you young, but it's usually a culmination of life,
Yes.
whether that's cholesterol, whether that's left ventricular hypertrophy, whether that's sclerosis of the arteries causing high blood pressure and hypertension, whether you smoked all your life, whether you have a high fat diet, whether you have a low fat diet and a high inflammatory diet, whether you have mitral valve prolapse. There are so many causes of heart disease, and they're all culminations of time and sometimes habit.
Well, and a
Cholesterol
big
is
chunk of
one,
genetics.
yeah, cholesterol clogging your arteries is one cause of heart failure among many. So tackling we're suggesting dietary recommendations for everybody in the world based on one factor to one disease that is actually the preferred way to die is irresponsible, I think, personally. If heart disease is not the number one killer, we should all be worried, because then it's cancer
Yeah.
or COVID, which was number 3 2 years ago, or influenza or accidents. I think I'm going down the list in order. Uh, it, yeah, accidental death, which is actually separated from car accidents. Accidental death includes overdoses and falling off a ladder and all of those things. And then it's car accidents, and then it's suicide. So I think I got the order right, but I know I got the first 3 right, the first 4 right, because influenza was right under COVID. Uh, if we ever don't have heart disease as the number one killer, it's a bad day. It's a bad year. We probably had a major world war. Is probably what we had.
Well, Putin's threatening to nuke everybody, so I'm sure it's fine. That was something you mentioned way back when I was talking about dealing with uh, people asking me nutrition questions, prospective clients or clients, and my kind of mini rant on vegetarianism, and it was something that made me feel dumb that I hadn't thought of it before, which was that I have a lot of South Asians that live in this area now, and a lot of them are vegetarian, which is why I always ask, are you doing it for religious moral reasons, or are you doing it for health reasons? And you pointed out that someone who grows up in India is coming from a line of generations of vegetarianism, which means it's going to impact their genetics.
Mm-hmm.
That you have generation after generation after generation where the body is geared towards this particular kind of diet. And the same would hold true for the Mediterranean diet or anything else. For most people here, you're used to eating a Western European American diet. If you radically change that, are you going to get the same results as someone who comes from a long line of, a half dozen generations of this diet impacting their genetics?
Well, one of the things about diet and exercise is this almost seemingly heartless statement, but I don't care. You pick how you want to die. Do you, again, I bring up heart disease is highly correlated with old age. Give me heart disease any day.
Mm-hmm.
Versus cancer. Or one thing about high carbohydrate diets versus high fat diets is inflammation. Carbohydrates are toxic. Glucose specifically is toxic in your system after so many hours of floating around in your bloodstream. Your body's trying to get rid of it in any way possible, i.e., using it as energy, which is the preferred way, sending it to your liver, which is just a recipe for fatty liver, and then your liver converts it to fat. And oh my goodness, the only kind of fat you can make in your body is saturated fat. So I'm avoiding saturated fats with my granola and bran muffin diet. Well, guess what you just did with the excess? You made a saturated fat in your body. Congratulations. Because that's what your body does. It cannot make a mono unsaturated fat like olive oil because we're not freaking olives.
Uh,
But let's get to the science. The science. Meta analysis of prospective cohort studies evaluating the association of saturated fat with cardiovascular disease. I know I don't usually just look at the conclusions, but we have the whole article here for you to read. Conclusion. There is no significant evidence for concluding that dietary saturated fat is associated with an increase of CHD or CVD, which is coronary heart disease or cardiovascular disease. Let's see. Clinical Nutrition 2010, which was where everything was going about that time. Haven't we talked about that it was around 2010 that everything started getting stupid again?
mhm.
And we were making advancements all the way to 2010. Now, if you go to the CDC website, they go to the old avoid saturated fats. Around the same time, Bill Gates wants us to eat bugs. Coincidence?
I mean, he's basically a Bond villain at this point.
Around the time they're telling us cows are polluting the environment. So sometime between 2010 and now, cows are polluting the environment. We need to avoid eating meat. We need to eat bugs.
No, you
Bill
need to
Gates
avoid
owns
being
more farmland in the United States than anybody else combined.
you and I need to avoid eating meat. He still gets to eat the Wagyu when he wants to. Because that's what our scant amount of cattle resources should be dedicated to, is making sure that the hoity-toity have all the Wagyu and fancy crap they want.
So
You
let's
and
go
I
in.
get to eat bugs.
Yeah, let's go into a little history because we've talked about this in previous episode, but as hopefully we get new viewers here and there. Back you brought up the flawed study, which basically this dude went around the world and studied everybody's diets, picked the one that fit his agenda, and touted the benefits of it. And it was a study done on 300 and something people with an 80% dropout rate. And this still is the basis of the food pyramid and all of the RDA recommendations we got in the 1950s going on forward, which just so happens to correspond with the corn lobby and the Crisco lobby. So we ate more wheat and corn and less saturated fats and substituted that for margarine and Crisco and vegetable oils. Well, let's see what vegetable oils do to your body. Where do I have that one? Oh, that's on whiteness. Oh, dang it. Oh, here we go. Vegetable oils. Intake of whatever that symbol is, omega-6 polyunsaturated fats, rich in vegetable oils, and risk of lifestyle disease. And we've got a nice long paper of how this fucks your nervous system up.
Well, you don't even have to get that nerdy. Does anyone remember the trans fat scare not that long ago? That, oh my gosh, all of a sudden people figured out trans fats are going to give you cancer and we're all going to die. How did trans fats come about in the first place, Samo?
Well, because we started using vegetable oils for everything and you had to make them solid at room temperature. So you had to denature the fat, which changed the shape of the molecule. And now it's a trans fat. Trans. I've heard that word before. Trans fat. It is not a real vegetable oil. It is a denatured vegetable oil. And so it stays solid at room temperature. That's where they came about. So now your Doritos have that nice little glisten to them, which Doritos are awesome, but I do avoid them as much as I can. every once in a while I'll eat a whole bag, but back to the story, that fat isn't running all over the place,
Yeah.
and it holds the nice cheesy goodness on it because it's solid at room temperature.
Right. It was a way to make fats healthier because the all natural
No, no, no,
fats
no.
that are
Get the
stable
wording right. Get the wording right. It's the way to take the quote unquote healthier fat, the vegetable fats,
Mhm.
and make them accessible in these products.
because we can't use lard or butter anymore because that's bad for you.
Mm-hmm.
So here, use this trans fat instead. And then 30, 40 years later, whatever it was, oh, our bad. That's giving you cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Oops.
Yeah. So the thing about polyunsaturated fats and trans fats is they do jack your nervous system up, and there is a seemingly high connection. And there are people who have a lot of resources on this. I'm trying to remember the names off the top of my head. Look at, I know Peter Attia's talked about it. Huberman's talked about it. And I'm wanting to say Dr. Drew just recently talked about it as well. But he brought up another author who's written many books on this that, of course, on deaf ears, and New York Times won't put it forward because they're paid by the people who make Doritos. But yeah, it's stupid because, again, pick the way you want to die. I would rather die at a ripe old age of a heart attack, which is a perfectly natural way to die because we're humans and that's what happens, because eventually your heart breaks down and it doesn't repair like other parts of your body, than a freaking tumor that causes me to go through chemotherapy, which causes me to not feel very good at all, even though I'm alive. And if I do survive, I have a horrible quality of life.
Mhm.
It's, I don't know. We went far afield on that.
Yeah, but I think it's still relevant. It's fear mongering masquerading as science.
Mm-hmm. And well, now here's the thing about cholesterol. So let's kind of socky back to what we were talking about. Cholesterol changes in diet can shift your blood cholesterol, but the underlying factor to it is your body actually makes most of its own cholesterol. And so this is going to take us down a different road, because yes, I can shift the total HDL, LDL levels depending on my diet, but for the most part, my body makes its own from what's already existing
What
in.
for, Samo?
Was that
Said what for? What does your body use cholesterol for? What's
uh
the big one?
hormones?
Your what's in your noggin?
Your brain?
Isn't that like 70% cholesterol or something like that?
It's a very large percent, yeah. And
Yeah.
well, because your brain is actually just a neurotransmitter center, right? And neurotransmitters are the precursors to hormones, which, because they're all made of cholesterol basically, and proteins. Well, so what is cholesterol? You hear HDL, LDL, right? The HDL stands for high density lipoprotein, right? Lipo being fat, protein, we know what a protein is, right? So this is a specific combination of fat and protein that is used for whatever purpose, whether it's being made into a hormone or it's transporting. A lot of times this is the transportation of fats throughout the body. The protein attaches to it, they all get together, and then they go to the part of the body they want to go to, which a lot of times is the liver, or to a cell that has a oxidative center to it that's going to, like you're doing aerobic exercise, you oxidate fat and you utilize it for energy, whatever it's being used for, or it's being shipped to an enzyme that's going to convert it into a cellular membrane, or an enzyme that is building or repairing parts of your brain or the blood brain barrier, or all of these things. That your skin has oil to it, right? That keeps things out. because anything that's water soluble cannot get in your skin.
Hmm.
That's awesome because I can go get in the swimming pool and not blow up with water and explode. I think that's pretty cool. I would not want to explode when I get in the shower. So, uh, and that's because of the oily nature of your skin. It repels water. It's survival. So all of these different things it can be used for, it's attached to a proteins, and what dependent on the proteins that's attached to it goes to different parts of the body. And the difference between HDLs and LDLs is the LDLs tend to kind of clump together and deposit on the cell walls, or the excuse me, the arterial walls, and the HDLs tend to actually suck that stuff up and then take it to wherever it needs to go, even if it's just shipping it out of your body. So that's why one's good and one's bad, because one tends to form the plaque and one tends to be better utilized by your body. But where were we going with that?
I don't remember.
Okay, so your body makes most of what
Hmm.
it's going to make on its own, somewhere to the tune of like 80 to 85%. And then the rest comes from your dietary intake. And it's not actually eating cholesterol that does it, because your intestines break it down into its bits and parts. So lipoprotein, you eat it, it becomes lipo and a protein. And then the protein is even broken up into amino acids before you're absorbing it, because you don't want to absorb whole proteins, because that's bad. Whole proteins in your bloodstream that you didn't make yourself is bad. Spike protein. But no, a good example of this is deer ticks. So
Oh,
everybody knows about Lyme disease, right?
I'm terrified of these things.
Okay, everybody knows about Lyme disease, but there's another thing that can happen. If a tick drinks the blood of an animal, and then you get that same tick while it still has that same blood in it, and you squeeze that blood into your body trying to get the tick off, you just squeeze the proteins into your body. Proteins in your bloodstream have an immune response. Whole proteins, just like we with spike protein, right? Same thing. So you become allergic to red meat. That sucks.
Terrifying.
So use the credit card to flick the tick off if you ever get a tick, by the way. Don't squeeze it, don't grab it, flick it off. But so the same thing with your body. You break it down into its bits and parts before you absorb it in your intestinal tract. So you ingest something that's high in cholesterol, you don't necessarily get the cholesterol from it. Now you get the fat and the proteins, and your body may decide to put them all back together at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe not the same ones at the same time, but that's still the materials are there. But that's the thing about cholesterol. Only about 15 or so percent of it is determined by your diet. So if you're normally good cholesterol and you eat a high saturated fat diet, you're not going to all of a sudden have bad cholesterol. But if you're borderline, now we're talking a different story. If I'm borderline genetically, then I eat a high cholesterol diet. Well, that tends to be a high fat diet, period. So now I'm getting all the bits and pieces that other 15% is going to put me over what's healthy. So that's the big thing about cholesterol. Where are you? What's your blood work? What's your genetics? And then what can I do to prevent it? And again, the big secret of the Mediterranean diet is the high HDL count you get from eating mono unsaturated fats, which the obvious source from the Mediterranean diet is olive oil. The other obvious source is cold water fish fat, salmon, the Inuit diet. That's why I brought them up earlier.
Hmm.
They eat a lot of fatty fish, cold water fish.
And they get to club seals.
And so that's real omega 3s. And guess what? I can go to HEB and go get an omega 3 supplement, because that HDL goes through and sucks up all the bad stuff. So the secret to it is actually the HDL count, not the fact that you're eating less fat.
Yeah. All right. Well, That's all my throat has time for. I'll have to rant about football some other time because it's getting harder and harder to talk.
Okay, well, let me go. Let me get one more thing, and then we can put the nutrition to bed for several episodes. Otherwise, we have to bring it back up. One of the things that's really tough about nutrition and diet studies and exercise studies too is that's different than like medication studies. And we've talked about randomized trials and everything
Mm,
like that. Give me a randomized trial where you can double blind placebo somebody eating McDonald's or a Mediterranean diet. You can't blind that. There's no way to blind that. So there are very few diet or exercise studies that end up in that level one type.
mhm.
And so when we're talking about the science, well, guess what? We're doing the best we can. I can't say resistance training versus cardio and double blind that. You know, if you're jogging or you're lifting weights, there's there's no way to fool somebody into thinking differently.
Yeah,
If you can, you probably got a special kind of person that has other problems. And that's the problem with all of these. Well, science says that cholesterol is lower in this diet than this one. You can't blind the study. The only
yeah.
one that I found that was even close was taking Mediterranean plus an extra shot of olive oil and Mediterranean plus a shot of something that looked like oil, and it was in a capsule. Both of them were in a capsule, so you didn't know if you were drinking oil or not. That was the closest I could find in a cholesterol study that blinded. Other than that, and the other one was following the Mediterranean diet, so it was two Mediterranean arms, one with extra oil, one without. That's about as close as you can get. I can't grab 100 people off the street and say we're going to try this exercise protocol versus this one, and you're not going to know which one you're going to get because you're going to do it once and you're going to know which one you got. You're either jumping or you're not. You're either stretching statically or you're not. It's there's no way to double blind these things. So, any thoughts on that before we go?
No, that's a good point I hadn't considered. It's why these kind of studies we bring up so often, and we say, okay, yes, but
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to have to point out, all right, well, this is like any study, this is where the flaws are, this is where the biases are, this is what was controlled for, this wasn't, these are the things that they couldn't control for. And that matters. That all matters.
Yeah, some of them are more uh, easily done than others. Like what I wanted to do with resistance training, measuring blood markers. Well, your mental attitude or your bias towards one thing or another isn't going to change how much creatine kinase is in your bloodstream, right? But if it's a long-term study comparing two different exercise modalities, your mindset going into the workout because you like one versus the other, or the proctor's mindset versus one or the other is going to affect how these workouts go over time.
Mhm.
And so it's going to change the result. Maybe damningly, maybe not. But you never know. That's why we double blind things. That's why we placebo control things.
No, at least we're supposed to.
Well, and back to the therapeutics from earlier to circle this all around before we close out. We never got good clinical trials. That was the main thing. And again, I have to restate my position. It never was this works and we should be doing it. It was this had some good upside to it, and doctors should be able to doctor. And if it was 10% effective, it saved 100,000. What was my number on?
1.5, wasn't it? I
Yeah,
think it
one.
was 1.5
Yeah, so
deaths.
so 105,000 people are still alive if it was 10% effective. And guess what? Placebo effect. Even if the clinical trial said it was all placebo effect, 105,000 people would still be alive. because your attitude going into illness can change how the illness
Yeah.
plays out, especially if it's something that takes you down over time. We see that we've got great evidence on that with cancer patients,
Yeah.
how positive their attitude is going into it. It's really highly correlated to the results. And it has nothing to do with the chemicals involved. It has to do with the fact that they're not highly anxious or stressed through the whole process. And now we take a respiratory virus, have a panic attack while you have a respiratory disease.
Ooh,
What's your
yikes.
result going to be?
Yeah.
So just the act of or just the fact that it appears a doctor is treating you in some way, shape, or form could have changed the result for those 10%. So that's my point on it. Now, do we have better drugs now? Most likely. Paxlovid seems to be working. The rebound effect seems to suck. So we have to do further research on that. Monoclonal antibodies seem to be awesome. But at the time when we made our initial point, it at least seemed to have some effect, and I don't care if it was placebo. Let doctors doctor.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got nothing else, so we'll see y'all next time and get back to Fires of Heaven.
Yeah, it'll be Wheel of Time next time. And then what social things you want me to start digging into for the next social episode we do?
Um, one of the things I was going to tangent on and I didn't when we were talking about the othering was what happened in North Dakota to this kid that was run down
Oh God, yeah.
by there's a lot to unpack there.
Okay, so at the risk of the YouTube gods here, if a certain person was responsible by his words for people storming the Capitol building,
Mm-hmm.
then why is not another certain person responsible for this incident? Because that's the motivating factor. That was the
Yep.
motive. Admittedly was the motive.
Oh yeah.
So I don't think he should be, but I don't think the other one should be as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's God, that poor kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Poor mom. He was on the phone with his mom when it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Okay,
sucks
so
all around.
I said heart disease, I will accept as a good way to go. Being run over by an SUV, not on my list.
Mm-hmm.
It'd probably be number 3 of no nos. Burning is probably number 1, but I don't know. Maybe number 2. It depends on how many times it took, but oh, that is horrible. Now,
Yeah.
yeah, you that's probably we can probably go down that road. I can get we can go back into the neurobiology of othering people because it's the theme of the day.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll see y'all next time for Wheel of Time. A little more levity next time, and then we'll get into the ugliness after
Okay,
that.
posthumous disclaimers, no medical advice. We're just giving you information. We're just showing you the numbers. No fitness advice because we are not our client. No diet advice. We're not nutritionists, and you're not my client, and I don't know anything about you other than that apparently you listened to us for about an hour and a half. So
Thank you for that.
yeah, thank you for that. Like, share, subscribe. Ooh, I gotta steal one from Clifton Duncan
What?
here. He's got the perfect little tagline that I wish I would have thought of it, but he did, and that's why he's an artist. He says, if you like me, share me with your friends. If you hate me, share me with your enemies.
There you go.
And that's perfect. All right. Later, guys.